Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy.
So we're going to be discussing Margie Velma Barfield today. She's our son bitch for the week that kills people. But we're going to talk about her childhood. Okay, so Velma Bullard.
Oh, wait, this isn't going to be all Southern?
No.
Because I sure done diddly am disappointed.
She does hail from South Carolina, but we ain't keeping up the accent the whole time because I'm already like excessively salivating doing that. I don't know why. But anywho.
Claire's over there just drooling while trying to talk.
Fortunately, there's no video with this.
You did say at the end of one of the episodes.
Look, rabbit. Yeah, like a St. Bernard. Fuck you, Adria. How about that? Okay, so Velma Bullard.
Oh, God. Okay. All right.
You
Go ahead.
You good? So Velma Bullard becomes Velma Barfield later on after she gets married. But she's born October 29th, 1932, to a poor family on a small tobacco and cotton farm in rural South Carolina. Now, she is the second child, but she's the oldest girl of 9 children to
Holy shit.
to Murphy and Lily Bullard.
That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of kids. 9? I get needing help on the farm, but you're not supposed to birth all your workers. Sorry, continue.
It would seem a good utilization of resources.
It sure done diddly does.
Assuming you can feed them all and clothe them all. She'll claim that she felt in her childhood very unwanted, but I imagine it's difficult having a family that large and people fall through the cracks. But she'll claim there was constant fighting in the home and
9 kids.
But that her mom would frequently be hit by her dad. So she just remembers that over anything else. But her family home had no electricity, no running water, and no outhouse.
Well, no shit, there's a lot of fighting in that house. Good God. So could you imagine having 9 or 8 siblings plus yourself and no electricity? Talk about, jeez. And no toilet.
You'd be outside. Now, the family used chamber pots to relieve themselves, or they took trips into the woods.
Wait, what's the time period on this?
She was born in 32, but I did look it up. By 1925, about half of all the homes in the United States had electricity. So it's just like, it's not like it wasn't there. It just, they didn't have it.
Yeah, not yet.
Now, I did already mention that Velma's dad was physically abusive with her mother. He was hot-tempered, had frequent drinking binges, which only fueled that. So basically, when he was home, it wasn't good. Now, her escape used to be school. So when she would go to school, she absolutely loved it. She loved her teachers. She worked hard to get good grades. But then as she started to get older, she began to notice the financial difference between herself and her classmates. And then they would start to tease her about her clothes.
Man, kids are assholes.
So nobody wants to be the odd one out. But so in order to like bridge that gap, she starts stealing money from her father and elderly neighbors to buy things so she can blend in with the other kids.
Poor baby. Stealing's not right, but that sucks.
Now, on one occasion, she stole money from one of the elderly neighbors. Her father finds out and whoops her ass. Now, from then on, she doesn't steal anything else in her childhood. Now, she's going to say that she remembers always having a fear of her dad throughout her childhood, and I feel like that's partially because of his harsh treatment of her mother. So punish all the children just as harsh. So avoid him. It didn't say what age, but at some point when Velma was young, she was running around at school, I would assume some sort of recess, and runs full speed into a boy at school that knocks her unconscious. And
What?
she hits him so hard, she's left with a permanent dent in her forehead, or not a dent, but a permanent knot on her forehead.
A speed bump?
Pretty much, because then they start nicknaming her Knothead. So not only are they picking
That's
on her
not
for
even a
her
creative.
clothes, no,
But that's
it's
not even
not.
not saying that they should get more creative with their name calling, but good Lord, was that boy okay? Or whoever she
Right?
smacked into? Because
She
I feel,
flat juggernaut ran at him.
I mean, oh my gosh. So your oldest nephew, when he was in, I think, ninth grade, they were playing kickball and he was running the base, but watching the ball that was flying through the air that his teammate had kicked and not paying attention. And he was vertically challenged at that point in time. He hadn't hit his growth spurt and smacked into another kid who was about 8 inches taller than him. That kid's teeth got knocked out, his front teeth, and his teeth hung like went into my son's forehead, and he ended up having to get stitches. But
The
that
hell?
was a hard enough hit to take out somebody's teeth and need stitches. So I can only imagine
Is
how
this the
hard she
same?
had to
Is
huh?
this the same boy that ran into a pole Halloween?
It sure is. He was wearing that mask and you couldn't see out of it, and there were no street lights on the little part that we were crossing through, and he smacked right into it and had a huge knot on his head. But seeing as how all of these killers
Head
have
injuries?
associated head injuries at young ages, I might want to keep an eye on that one.
Right. Okay, so at age 11, Velma starts, well, she doesn't start doing chores, but her chores include washing and ironing the clothes for the family of 11, as well as mending the ones that needed it. She wasn't quick with it at first, and her dad told her she needed to do the laundry more so that she could be better and quicker at it. Now, she didn't appreciate this naturally, but at first I was like, I sympathized with her, but then I was like, isn't that with everything? You got to do it more if you want to be proficient at it. Not to say
Yeah,
that
but
I enjoy doing laundry either, but keep in mind they don't have electricity, so she's doing the washboard thing.
well, I don't feel like at that point in time they were necessarily washing their clothes after every use. You know what I mean?
Well, keep in
So
mind all
while I realize
the
that
poopy diapers.
uh, always got to bring it back to the poop, don't you, Claire?
I'm just saying, if she's 11 and the second oldest, it's a lot of butts. So I would say there's a lot of dirty laundry.
Yeah.
Now, by 12, she cooks the meals and everything for the family, and by 13, her dad surprises her with a beautiful, expensive pink ruffled gown. I don't know where she was supposed to wear it to, but she recalls this as the happiest day she could remember ever.
That's sad.
Yeah, yeah. Now,
Sweet and sad.
but I feel like her dad got her something nice and pretty because she's working hard doing all the things, and then she's being made fun of at school because of her clothes. Not that she could have worn an expensive pink ruffled gown to school, but I imagine that was like her treasured item.
Yeah.
Now, later that same year, she meets a boy at school who ends up being her first husband. This would be Thomas Burke.
Wait, how old is
I said later she's gonna meet him. Like they meet.
she? Okay.
And I'm also just going to throw this out there. Velma sleeps in the same bedroom as her parents throughout high school. I bring this up because speaking of her dad, that one time she's sick and stays home from school with the flu, her dad rapes her.
Oh.
So where on the outside he would appear to be a doting father, as we've also seen and goes on inside the house when no one's looking, can be some pretty startling stuff.
I was really
Would
trying
start
to like the dad, but not so much no more.
Yeah. So he would start sexually abusing her around 13, which would obviously make her look for any and every excuse to be gone from the house and eager to escape him. So when she's 15, she wants to join the school basketball team, but her parents tell her no because she has too many chores and they need her at home, which naturally makes her mad. At 16, she begins attending church regularly and is baptized the same year. And since she turned 16, I guess that was the age her parents allowed her to start dating. So she's excited to begin dating Thomas Burke, who she met when she was 13. So they become
Cute.
sweethearts. After a year of dating, Thomas proposes when they're out at date night at a local movie theater.
At 16?
17. They
Oh,
dated for a year.
they're still in high school.
Right. So Velma quits school in her junior year. They run away and get married in Dillon, South Carolina.
I wonder if she told him about like her dad raping her, and that was his way of saving his little love is to marry her and run off.
I feel like just the hitting and all that
Yeah,
could be,
that was his way of trying to save her.
yeah. Now, Thomas also quit school, obviously, because they both run away, and he begins
Mhm.
working at a textile mill in Red Springs. Now, it's not till she turns 19 that she gives birth to their son that they name Ronnie, followed by Ronnie's birth is the birth of their daughter, Kim, just a short 2 years later. Now, Velma's still going to church regularly and takes the kids to Sunday school on Sundays. But when she turns 23, she's hit by a drunk driver as a pedestrian and
Oh
is
gosh.
hospitalized, where she first experiences depression. Because I imagine being in the hospital, all of that, it's not, obviously it's not going to be fun.
No.
She'll recover and everything, and then when 3 years later, she's 26. They moved to Rayford, North Carolina, and she begins working in a textile mill. And this is kind of when her and Thomas start seeing less of each other because they're working opposite hours.
That sucks.
At this point, I mean, they're happy together. Their marriage seems happy. It's not until she turns 30, which is roughly 15 years into their marriage, that they've had a great go of it. But shortly after she turns 30 and starts at the mill, she starts having medical issues, which end up causing her to have an emergency hysterectomy.
Oh gosh.
So, without her being able to have any more children, Velma begins to be insecure about being a woman and a wife, and sees it as her womanhood's taken away and she can't have any more kids. She came from a big family, so I feel like they plan to have a big family. But
Sad.
in order for her husband to also cope, he starts drinking, and then Velma starts taking Librium and Valium, both of which have a calming effect, and they also can be addictive. Now, because of the surgery, she'll also suffer from chronic back pain. Now, paired with the drugs and the back pain, she starts having behavior changes, which also affect her, fuel her drug addiction.
Well, if they make her calmer, isn't that, not to say it's bad, but doesn't that make her
Well,
less argumentative and less combative? Just pop a pill and
probably so, but if they sedate her to a point of unconsciousness, it's not like
it's not an attractive
this is like
quality.
where it starts of her becoming dependent on them.
Gotcha.
In 1963, Thomas's mom gives them an acre of land in Parkton, and they build a 3-bedroom home for their family. Now,
Oh, that's awesome.
now as the years go on, the happy marriage kind of starts to turn downhill, and they become they start having bitter arguments more frequently. Now, just two short years after they build their house, Thomas would be involved in a car accident that gives him a concussion and would cause him to have severe headaches the rest of his life.
Oh gosh. Remember Dad used to tell us driving would be the most dangerous thing we ever did in our lives?
On a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, it definitely applies to these two because good Lord, 2 serious car accidents, like that's
Well,
insane.
keep in mind, she wasn't driving. She was hit as a pedestrian.
Yeah, that's true. But
So
it still
apparently
involved a vehicle.
walking. But
That's true.
so he's going to get involved in a car accident and have severe headaches that cause him to increase his drinking and also to add drugs on top of that to cope with the pain of those headaches. Now,
that sounds sad.
apparently, Velma, she's not seeing anything wrong with the drugs on her own account, but Velma abhors alcohol and is concerned about his drinking. So that's part of What they'll bicker about is his drinking. Now, in a drunken rage, Thomas will hit Velma, and she calls the police. Now, he's taken to Dorothea Dix State Hospital because of his drinking, and they hold him there for 3 days. Now, he is livid with her when he gets out because he's also embarrassed that she sent him there. And because he was absent from his work, they fire him.
Oh, gosh. But at the same time,
yeah, he did it.
It could have been a lot worse. He was in a drunken stupor and put hands on her. He's lucky she didn't have his ass thrown in jail. Instead, she tried to get him help for his alcohol abuse. I understand the frustration on his part, but if he didn't touch her, it wouldn't have happened. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And he should take some ownership of his own drinking and behavior rather than placing it all on its her. So that brings us to, in 1968, Thomas pins Ronnie, who's now 17, up against the wall and threatens the life of his son with a knife after they clearly had a disagreement.
That's one hell of a disagreement.
Well, I imagine he's spending a lot of his time drunk and acting a fool, so...
And a teenager thrown into that mix. Because I got me a couple of them some bitches and they get mouthy. Granted, I don't pull a knife. Anyway, continue. The teachers that listen to this, that
you don't pull a knife on your children, not even a tiny one.
Well, yeah, I don't do that. But they know, all our teachers or anybody that's got a teenager out there, they know them some bitches get super mouthy.
Hey, we know. We was one.
I was a good one. You was the bad one.
Andrew, you carved fuck into the soap.
It was my bar of soap. I didn't realize that
I wouldn't say that's what a stellar teenager would do. Especially
I wasn't even a teenager.
One. Oh, well. There we go. Anyway, way to make it about yourself.
You know what? If the only thing my kids ever did was carve the word fuck into a bar of soap in a bathroom that only my children use, and I stumbled upon it because I chose to bathe in their bathroom, then you know what? I feel blessed because I wasn't
so many bathrooms.
Well, yeah, but not going out and drinking or doing drugs or, oh my God, getting knocked up or knocking up their girlfriends. Not that that's always a bad thing, but I don't feel like it's a good thing for teenagers. If that's the only thing my kids do is the same thing I did, which is carve a bad word into a bar of soap, then
clearly I'm going to have to talk to our mother regarding stories of your bad behavior because I'm sure there's plenty. But anyway, so naturally with them Thomas being an alcoholic and him and Ronnie having words and Velma having her drug issues, that she'll have a nervous breakdown later that year and is taken to the hospital for it.
I feel like that's a justified nervous breakdown. Yeah, between her drug use and he started putting hands on her, so I feel like well, if you're gonna mentally snap.
As far as I know, it was the one time he learned his lesson.
Because she had his ass locked up.
But by the time Velma's 37, she'll start taking her prescription medication 3 times a day rather than the once a day. And then at this point, she learns that now, obviously, you're going to be doing the whole she's out in 10 days. The doctor should probably be suspicious. But she figures out if she goes to several doctors to get the same prescriptions, this can maintain her addiction because nobody's communicating.
That's a lot of work. Because you can't just go to a doctor and be like, hey, can you write me this prescription? That means she would have to go to that doctor, give him the same ailments, and pray that those doctors give her the same drugs as the previous doctor, and then keep up that whole routine.
Well, seems like so a lot of work. I feel like there's a lot of issues that people like doctors will write similarly. So I don't feel like it was that hard for her to do that one, especially since she's got legitimate issues. She's just using them excessively.
Well, how much of her legitimate issues are now drug induced?
It doesn't help anyhow. But so this causes Velma to start working 2 jobs to support her drug habit and also her family. She begins
So,
work
so one job's to pay for the drugs, the other one's to pay for the family.
probably so. But she'll say she worked 2 jobs to support the family. I threw in her drug habit because she has to be able to pay for that shit to be filled, and then also the doctor's appointments to get said prescriptions. And naturally, Thomas is drinking during the day, so I don't feel like anybody's looking for him to be employed. But she becomes a clerk at a department store, and then her other job is a machine operator at a cotton mill. Now, a year into this, Velma and Thomas have a real bad fight, which makes Velma do like a fine, I'm gonna go run errands. She's got to go to the laundromat anyway. She also has to drop the kids off at school, which leaves Thomas home alone. Now, while everybody's gone, somehow there's a fire at the house, and it does kill Thomas.
What?
Now, Thomas dies of smoke inhalation. Authorities believe he fell asleep after he was drinking and had lit a cigarette, and it was just in his hand, and it set him ablaze.
How wouldn't he die of burns though, not smoke inhalation? Like I
I
feel
feel
like if
like
you
since he
set
was,
yourself
well,
on
I don't
fire,
know. It's probably like which one happened first, the chicken or the egg.
I
Just
don't know.
like obviously, if he's breathing in smoke, that's gonna seal off your throat as much as it will if you breathe in the fire. So it's just neither one was good for his health.
Hey, I've recently experienced fire. It is not fun.
I don't feel like you need to experience breathing in a flame or the smoke to know stay away.
Hey, don't judge. You don't know.
You weren't designing a favorite pastime. Let me waltz through this blaze.
I don't think he was either.
He was napping. Anyway, so the children and Velma get home, and obviously they're devastated that their dad's dead.
The house caught on fire?
So it didn't burn the house down, which makes me think of like the Mythbusters thing when maybe it wasn't Mythbusters, maybe it was CSI. When they try to recreate some shit and they do like a dummy and a lit cigarette in the chair, and it's like it did stay isolated to that area kind of situation rather than like a full blown kitchen fire situation.
So it just set his area on fire? Like
It would appear because the whole house doesn't burn down.
did the fire department have to come out, or she just comes home and he's dead with some burns
Andrea, I
everywhere?
don't know. It's just he
It
died
don't
in a
make sense.
fire. Nobody was home.
Did they have to move?
This isn't about this fire. I'm just saying he died. Smoke inhalation is what they said.
Yeah, but did Velma and her kids have to move out of the house, or they could still live there?
I haven't even been able to get there yet.
I'm just trying to understand how bad a fire has to be
It wasn't that
to kill
bad.
somebody.
They were still
But
there, and like a little while later, Ronnie will graduate from high school.
Oh,
So
all right.
it's not until there's yet another fire at that home that
What?
yeah, and no one was home, so no one was hurt. But that makes them have to move to her parents' home so they could wait for the insurance money to pay for damages. Which to me sounds like some shoddy electrical.
Yeah, there's something suspicious going on. Either some bad electrical or Velma really just wanted to be done with that house.
Yeah, which by the way, don't even understand why that was a blip on the radar because her dad raped her in her childhood. So the fact that she has a daughter, you would
Yeah.
think she'd want to keep him away from her.
And she's at around the age that the daughter, Kim, is around the age that Velma was when her dad started raping her. So even more of a red flag. She had no friends or nobody. She had 9 siblings. Or 8 siblings. She doesn't have somebody she can go stay with.
And evidently was moving home with her mom and dad. So
that sucks.
Yes.
If you tell me that he rapes the daughter and then Velma kills
No,
the dad,
no.
I'm not going to feel sorry for him.
No. So it doesn't go that route, but I just thought it was interesting. I would imagine you've got to be pretty desperate to that's your only option.
Yeah.
But one of her coworkers at the department store introduces her to Jenny Barfield, and they start dating. Now, Jennings has emphysema and diabetes, so he's not in the healthiest state. So she moves into his home and almost immediately begins being his caretaker. And they get married in August 1970, which is
we like them 70s. Sorry.
But is it like a year after Thomas died?
That was fast.
Yeah.
You'd think since he was supposed to be like the love of her life and they were married for so long, granted they did fall on some hard times, but to be moved in with some other guy
within a year. I know.
yeah,
I
that's
thought that was
fast.
pretty quick. If I came home and found Dave smoking on the couch, like not a cigarette, but like
Yeah, I
he's
get it.
just I would
His
be
flames
so
have gone out.
beyond devastated, and I feel like I would throat punch a coworker if they're like, "Hey, I want to introduce you." I'd be like, "Get the fuck away from me. How about that? I am not prepared to take on another one."
Yeah, and you've got 2 kids to worry about. No. I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, but regardless, they get married. A few weeks in, Velma overdoses on prescription and is hospitalized.
Gee,
Now
because nobody saw that one coming.
let me tell me if you saw this one coming. She's released, and 2 months later, she overdoses yet again and is hospitalized.
Did anybody call into question where she was getting said pills from?
After an argument with Velma over her abuse of prescription drugs, and I guess at some point in that argument, mentions divorce.
Who mentions divorce?
I feel like it was Jennings because she's not prepared for divorce. No, Jennings will become ill shortly after they have that squabble, and I feel like it's justified. They've barely been married, and you've had to go to the hospital twice because you've overdosed. There's a problem.
Is she overdosing on purpose, or is it overdosing because she's just popping so many pills to
I
get a
think
fix?
she's popping so many pills, she just goes way too far, kind of thing. But
Okay.
so I feel like he's concerned. And if he mentioned divorce, the way I picture that argument going is if you don't stop, I'm not going to watch you do this. I'm not coming home to finding you dead on the floor. I'm going to leave, is the way I took that. Now, again, shortly after that argument, Jennings will become ill. He'll start struggling with his breathing. He'll start having vomiting and diarrhea, and then contract an illness shortly after that and die of a heart attack.
What?
They are married less than 1 year before he's dead.
Oh my gosh.
Now,
you said that she had to take care of him. Was he sickly to begin
well, I
with,
told
or
you,
he
she
just
had emphysema and diabetes.
did she kill him?
Don't get ahead of the story.
I'm gonna take that as we're in the 70s
and shit
and
happened.
he dies.
Nobody's suspicious at this point.
Because it's in the 70s. Keep going.
Now, I don't think you'll be surprised to know that Velma is in a fragile mental state because you figure 2 years she's lost 2 husbands. Her family just really feels like she's just plagued with disaster. Her son will come to her and tell him that he's going to enlist into the military. Now, this is in the throes of Vietnam, right?
Mm-hmm.
So her son feels like it's only a matter of time before he gets drafted anyway, so he's just going to go and fight for his country. Now, Velma would be very against that one because obviously her little fragile brains, but she'll write to his superiors and beg for him to be released from his military contract.
What?
I feel
Could you imagine your mom writing a letter and being like, I know my son signed up with all these other men willing to fight for our freedom, but can you please tell him no? No, thank you.
Shoot, we're in the throes of a war. Nobody wants their child to be drafted, but it's just like, I mean, ugh. Well, anyway, so it doesn't work, obviously. I feel like if anyone even read the shit, they were like, what? But
you know what? I don't think she's probably the only helicopter parent that sent in a letter.
Yeah, well, to try to get him out, but he's not drafted. He wanted to go, and he's sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Now, 7 months later, Velma's house catches fire again, which I personally feel like was her attempting to get like some sort of a disaster and then he's got to come home kind of thing. It seemed attention seeking, but she's not charged with anything and
Which
no one,
house?
I believe it was probably Jennings. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know whose house. There's so many fires, so many things that she's just, it could have been an accident. I feel like it's possible she set something on fire unintentionally, or she's probably a smoker. Have you ever seen somebody try to light a cigarette off of a stove burner?
Only in the TV.
Well, a lot of the times they'll leave that on and forget. And if you pair that with her conking out and not realizing she is in her little drug induced nappy time, that she could have set her own shit on fire unintentionally. But regardless, there's a fire. Now, Velma nearly dies of an overdose due to abusing her prescription medication and is hospitalized for 3 weeks. Now,
Only 3
obviously,
weeks?
Andrea, what the fuck? I can't take that. She was there for 3 weeks.
So much hostility. Tone it down. I just asking questions. The woman's almost killed herself multiple times. I feel like somebody needs to supervise her ass.
They did for 3 weeks.
And then what?
How long do you want them to keep her for? Like,
I think she needs a mental evaluation to see if she's suffering from depression. And if it's not depression, then she needs like somebody needs to force her ass into substance abuse stuff.
They probably did that in the 3 weeks. But regardless, her not showing up to her job for those 3 weeks, she gets fired.
That's karma for getting Thomas fired.
So because she's fired from the department store, she loses the home that Thomas has built for them because she can't pay the mortgage, which I think
she still had that house.
Super sad. Well, it didn't burn down.
I thought it burned enough to where they had to move back in with her parents, and then she shacked up with the.
Because it was supposed to be fixed up. Now I don't know if it was a case of as it was being repaired scenario, and then she moved in with Jennings anyway because they were married and typically live together. But maybe she was holding on to it because her adult children, like it was going to be a family house scenario. Whatever the plan was, she still had it. So I think it's super sad that was their house. Yeah. Assuming she didn't kill him, that was their home that they had built together. But anyway, since now she's jobless and homeless, she moves back home with her mom and dad.
Again?
She's like a bad penny. She just keeps turning up.
I ain't heard that one before. I thought it was a bad rash that don't go away.
Andrew, you need to go to the doctor.
No, I don't. It's an expression, you ass.
I haven't heard it's like a bad rash. It don't go away. That's
I've never heard of a bad penny.
Yeah, and I almost called it an ugly penny. Yeah, it's like bad luck. It just keeps coming around. A bad penny. It just keeps coming up. Now, soon after she moves in, her dad dies of lung cancer. A death.
Does he?
A death she had no hand in.
Really? Now, I'm getting kind of suspicious of this one.
Now, with her father now deceased, the only other man in Velma's life was her son, who is in Vietnam. He writes to her and lets her know that when he gets back, he plans to get married. Now, Velma's not thrilled with this, and she does not give her blessing. Instead, she's crushed. We're telling her son, I've always been the most important woman in your life, and now you're going to have her, and you won't even want to come around me. Ronnie attempts to reassure her that his love for his future wife won't take away his love for his mom. But I
feel sorry for the future wife.
But it does not ease Velma's jealousy, and he does end up getting married when he gets home.
I feel sorry for his wife or fiance because I couldn't imagine having to compete with the other woman, and the other woman is the mother-in-law. Like, how do you compete with that?
What do you expect him to do?
Don't know.
Well, anyway, so Velma's still living with her mother, and those two constantly argue. Now, she'll say that her mother expected her to wait on her hand and foot, and Velma wasn't being her mother's slave. Then they'll get into it when her mother finds her passed out from taking too many pills and give her a hard time about that. Which, again, just like when her and Jennings argued about it, she's always passed out or ODing. She's got a problem, but she just doesn't seem to appreciate that everyone in her life is concerned about it.
Or annoyed. I'm guessing that the mom's more annoyed.
Probably
Like,
so.
could you imagine having an adult daughter move home?
And she
She
just lays
probably
around all day.
Yeah, she probably doesn't help do shit around the house. She's ODing and passing out on the couch or on the floor or on the bed or wherever the hell she's passing out and just in a zombie-like state. Like, I couldn't imagine that. That's a burden for the mother.
Like when
And
she
she's
said
lost her husband,
like
so
when she said she refused to be her mother's slave, I feel like it went along the lines of, "I'm not coming home to you passed out on the floor. There's garbage all around here. Pick up your shit."
or it was on the, "You're not working, you can help keep the house straightened up. You're the one making the mess.
Okay.
Clean it up."
I wasn't there, so I don't know. It's just how my brains interpreted it.
As agrees, as agrees.
Now,
I sure done diddly do.
in 1973, this is 2 years into living with her mother, she takes out a $1,000 loan in her mother's name using her mother's home as collateral and forging her mother's signature. A month later, she does it again against her car.
Um, Not to sound like the piece of shit in the room here, but
Haven't
if
we
you're
all
gonna
done that? No, Andrew, we
if you're
haven't.
gonna I wasn't gonna say that, but if you're going to jeopardize your mother's house, shouldn't it be for more than $1,000?
I don't know what it looked like. But maybe it was a case of anything more than $1,000, it had to be done in person.
She didn't do it in person?
I wasn't there, Andrea. This isn't my first eyewitness account of Velma's life.
I'm gonna say the 70s were super lax on everything, not just the judicial system, but apparently the way they do banking also.
No, like even right now, you could get a loan right now without talking to anybody, without seeing anybody, and do it all either through the mail or, well, then it wouldn't have been online. But $1,000, nobody's gonna really raise an eyeball.
Did you really just say raise an eyeball?
Shut up, Andrew. You know what I meant.
I do not. I've heard of raise an eyebrow. I ain't never heard
Well,
raise an eyeball.
nobody raised an eyebrow or an eyeball. How about that? Now it's a phrase.
I don't think it is. I feel like if you're raising your eyeball, you got some problems.
It's right up there with the camel that broke the straw's back.
No, that's not a thing. No, it's not. It's a straw that broke the camel's back. Camel can't break the.
Tell me a camel can't break the straw's back.
The straw doesn't have a back.
I've seen the back of a straw. Looks mighty like the front.
You're so stupid. You've been in Alabama way too long.
It's praise. I said what I said. You knew what I meant.
I did not. I did not. I'm just sitting here like, hold up.
Height, Edwina. Anyway, thanks for a rude interruption, but we'll continue.
Rude, I'm just pointing out.
Yet you're still interrupting.
Hmm.
Noise is still an interruption, just so we're clear.
Okay, carry on.
Savages!
Keep talking, woman.
So in the summer of 1974, her mother becomes mysteriously ill, complaining of severe stomach pains, intense diarrhea, vomiting, nausea. She's admitted into the hospital, but she's released when her symptoms just suddenly subside.
So I'm going to say that Velma is like Typhoid Mary. And
everybody gets a bout of diarrhea when she's around. Well, on August 23rd, a man Velma had been dating is killed in a traffic accident. Now, Velma is not present, so this death at least is hocked up to a coincidence.
Bullshit. I say she hired somebody.
I'm concerned at how people are driving in the Carolinas at this point, because this is the second person in the story to have gotten struck as a pedestrian.
He was a pedestrian.
Fine, it was a traffic accident. I don't know if he was driving or
It's
not,
still a
but it's
second traffic
still
accident.
it's a
Thomas
not
was
good
in one.
one. Yeah,
There's lots of bad driving.
Thomas
Yeah.
was in one. Velma was run over as a pedestrian. And hindsight, if that person would have finished her off, all these people would have lived a happy life. But
And there would have been a whole lot less diarrhea for everybody.
there's a sale on toilet paper, all three. But regardless, they hawk it up to poor Velma. She has such a rough life. Now, weirdly, Velma was a beneficiary of a life insurance policy that he had, and she gets $5,000.
Wait, they were only dating.
I know, I thought it was weird. Weirdly suspicious that he has a sudden death. But must have really liked her.
I further stand by my she hired somebody to drive his ass over.
But you know what's real shitty? You would think since she's now stolen $2,000 from her mother, she would take that $5,000 and pay the shit off and be like, whew, that was
She
lucky.
didn't?
No, because early December, her mother Lily gets an overdue notice from the loan company. And then, so they have a Christmas gathering and the whole family gets together. Everybody's laughing, enjoying themselves. Lily and Velma work together in the kitchen to make that turkey dinner and all the desserts for everybody. But while everybody's opening presents, she's like just talking with one of her sons about how she got that letter in the mail on like a past due loan for her car, which she again owns outright. So it seemed weird for her to get a past due notice on something she owns outright. And her son's just like, don't worry about it. It's probably just a weird mix up with the paperwork. Don't you fret about it, Ma.
That's bad advice, by the way, people.
Yeah, like don't disregard some shit. Oh, I think it was more he's not telling her not to do anything with it, but don't worry about it. You get it straightened out. It's probably just a mix up. This is during Christmas, but by like the 30th of December, her mysterious stomach pains just come right back. Now, Velma calls her brother. He rushes over and is horrified at the scene he finds. His mother's flailing in pain and vomits up blood. Now, he calls 911 immediately, and she's rushed to the hospital via ambulance. Velma rides with her, and she dies 2 hours after being admitted. Now, her doctors are unable to find a cause, but list her cause of death as a heart attack. An autopsy is not performed.
I didn't realize one of the side effects of a heart attack was vomiting blood.
Now, Lily is only 64 when she passes.
It's like watching a movie where you try to guess the ending as it goes. It's like, oh, she done did it. It was Velma with the poison in the kitchen, and now the bouts of diarrhea and apparently blood.
It's not right.
I have a serious problem with all these coroners that are just like, it looks like it's pretty legit, so it's questionable, but we'll just write this down.
I feel like they do like does the family have an issue? Nah, just put it as natural. So basically, if you have suspicions, you need to be an advocate for your family member or loved one, because the rest of the world, they don't care.
True. Very true.
Nobody suspects anything, and bear in mind, Velma's a churchgoer and a devoutly religious person that sang praises by her reverend. So she's certainly not looking like she's anything more than the caretaker to her mother.
Can I just say that not only have we connected the dots between severe head injuries as children leading to psychos as they get older, but also do not trust what a reverend pastor or anybody has to say about anybody, because I think probably like the third or fourth one of a case that we've done where they're like, oh, they're great, and they sing the praises of like what a great human being this person is, and it turns out they're really a killer piece of shit.
Well, I think it's not hard to put on a facade while you're at church. Not that I would do that, but I'm just saying, if he only sees her 1-2 days out of the week, he only sees what she wants him to anyhow. So,
and he's not even seeing her for the whole day. He's seeing her for like an hour or so, and she's in a group with a bunch of other people. It's not even a one-on-one conversation.
We don't know. But anywho, so she moves in with her daughter Kim and her husband. Now, during this time, Velma gets caught writing bad checks. Now, the sheriff department comes around and tells her she needs to pay that shit back or she's going to go to jail. Now, Velma, she kind of gets all twitchy because she doesn't have money to do that. That's why they were bad checks. So she goes to her son's house and overdoses on her medication,
That's
attempting
disgusting.
suicide.
She goes to her son's house to try to kill herself.
Maybe he wasn't home.
That's still sick.
She's got a weird attachment to that boy. So it was like
Wouldn't you want to shield him from finding your dead body? Or maybe it wasn't an actual suicide attempt. Maybe it was a
cry for help.
Not even a cry for help, but like a manipulation for help.
Yeah. So she isn't successful in her suicide attempt, and somehow she manages to break her collarbone in this theatrical suicide. But this causes her yet another 3-week stay in the hospital. And then she's informed when she's released, she's going to head to jail for those bad checks. Now, that's in 1974 when Velma is arrested and sent to jail. She's released, or after she's arrested, she's released to wait her court hearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she overdoses again and is rushed to the hospital and has her stomach pumped. Now, the next day, she goes to court and pleads guilty for those bad checks and is sentenced to 6 months. But she gets out after serving 3 months for good behavior. Now, during that time, Velma, or her daughter Kim, will call Velma's doctors and ask them to stop writing prescriptions for her mother.
Good call, Kim.
I feel like should have happened in the earlier
first overdose.
Years,
yeah,
right. But I don't know if maybe the first overdose they were doing the whole. Maybe she just mixed them up. Or took them too close together. So that's the downside to having multiple medications that can have a sedative-like effect.
I've lost track of how many times she's overdosed.
I don't think
lots.
I don't think anybody knows. Certainly not Velma.
Is she aware of her surroundings?
She doesn't seem to be aware of her own problem. I don't know. She's a fucking mess is what she is, and I feel bad for her children for having to take care of her stupidness. But 6 months after her jail thing and everything, we're in November 1975. Velma's 43, if you weren't keeping up, and becomes a caretaker of an elderly couple as an in-home nurse for $75 a week. Now she's taking
I don't feel like somebody that's regularly overdosing should be a caretaker of an elderly person.
I'm concerned how often we'll do stuff and no one's checking credentials. What does she have in her job history that would make her a candidate for an in-home nurse?
I don't know. Maybe it's the drug use.
But I guess it's more of a less of nursing and more of a she just needs to be there if somebody falls down rather than actually assisting medically. And let's face it, it costs money to have somebody who does have credentials to be able to provide real good care.
Get what you pay for kind of thing.
Yeah, so if they just need somebody to be home to help like reach something, I guess what credentials do you need? But I don't feel like she's providing anything actually medically for them. It just in-home assistance is what I feel like it should be called, because an in-home nurse is not what she's doing.
And that's assuming that she's not comatose when they need her help, because I'm assuming her drug use is continuing.
Now, she's caring for 94-year-old Montgomery Edwards, who's a diabetic who has lost his vision and both legs to his diabetes.
Poor guy.
And also his wife, who's 84, and her name's Dolly. Velma begins to hate Dolly because she's overly critical of everything Velma did. Now, Velma would say Dolly was constantly complaining and nitpicking on every little thing she did. And Dolly would say, to Velma's face, by the way, that she's always falling short of her job duties.
Okay, so I feel like Dolly was expecting somebody to actually be awake to do her job. And she's like, this old bitch, she's just laying here passed out on the couch, and I ain't got no help. I ain't paying for this.
Yeah, but 75... yeah, she's doing.
And she's living there.
She's paying $75 a week. She's gonna get her money's worth.
Well, and you said she's living there, right?
Yes.
So not only are they housing her, but they're also paying her to live there.
So in September, Dolly's alcoholic nephew, Stuart Taylor, would come to stay with his aunt and uncle in their Lumberton home because he's going through a divorce. Now, I personally think Stuart didn't have anywhere else to go. It wasn't just a visit. But regardless, he meets Velma in September. Now, in January, now we're in 77, Montgomery will fall ill to a stomach virus and die.
Oh my gosh.
Now, Velma stayed on to help Dolly. The two would continue their bickering just a few short weeks after Montgomery. Dolly's going to fall ill and pass away as well. Now, this is only in March, so he died in January. Dolly dies in March, developing a strange stomach virus before she passed. Yeah. Now, Dolly would tell her stepson when she was not feeling well that she thought she had the flu, but Velma hadn't been a caretaker for them for a year before they both were dead.
Sounds kind of like that second husband of hers.
Yeah. Now, naturally, this leaves Velma job and homeless, so Velma went on to care for a second couple just a few short weeks later, as yet again a live-in caretaker for John Henry Lee, who's 80, and Record Lee, who's 76. Now, Record had broke her leg, and that's why she needed help around the house, because she could take care of herself, but she's got to take care of her husband as well, and to take care of both of them, she just needed somebody to help out. Now, Velma forges one of John Henry's checks for $50 and then panics that he'll find out. Because as we've seen...
She didn't learn her lesson?
No, she did not. But now, as we've seen, Velma doesn't have very good nerves and is all panicky. Now, it's not even 6 months before John Henry begins complaining of stomach and chest pains, along with vomiting and diarrhea. And might I point out at this point, I don't have it in me to be a caretaker for an in-home person. So more power to those who can. But I can tell you, should I ever have that position, I wouldn't want to give somebody anything that would give them vomiting and diarrhea. No, thank you. No, I'm not. No.
So when the kids are sick, I can't do the cleanup of vomit. That's all Jason. I cannot do it. It makes me want to gag. So I couldn't imagine being like, seems like a brilliant idea to have it come shooting out both ends. No.
Oh, that's where I'm like, why would you want to do that?
It seems like a very messy way to take somebody out.
Like, I would not. That's just so foul. Like,
really.
Oh no. On April 27th, John Henry gets so sick. And again, with the upset stomach and diarrhea. As his condition worsens, Velma calls the ambulance. Now, the medics rush in to find a sweaty, gray-faced man and get him to the hospital as quick as they can. Now, he starts to recover in the hospital and is released on May 2nd. That's 4 days, if you weren't counting, in the hospital before he's released. Now, doctors...
And he's all better?
Yeah. Now, doctors aren't sure what made him so sick and so suddenly sick at that, but they assume he just had a virus and it ran its course. Now, throughout May, John Henry will continue to have good days and bad days. Some days he'll be plagued with vomiting, diarrhea, cramps, cold sweats, the whole thing. And then other days he's fine, but because of all the vomiting, the diarrhea, the sweating, he's dropping weight super quick.
I can't imagine why.
Now, John Henry's daughters would visit, and they'd be grateful that Velma was there to care for him, saying how sweet she doted on him. Now, I find that particularly sad because, again, since we spoiled it and she's poisoning these people, she's giving him diarrhea and making him vomit, and his daughters are sitting there thinking they're grateful for her. That's so fucked up. And then at the same time, I feel like the daughters were probably like, glad
God we're not
Velma's
the ones having
here.
to
Otherwise, we'd be having to clean up that shit. But regardless, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
The shit and them feeling thankful for her. But anyway, so John Henry takes a turn for the worse again, and Velma calls another ambulance, but there is little the hospital can do for him by the time he makes it there because he's just so badly deteriorated.
Poor guy.
He dies.
Way.
He dies on June 4th, and doctors would call it a severe stomach virus. Now, Velma quits her job as a caretaker for Record 4 months after John Henry's passing, since Record can get around on her own, and moves into her own trailer in Lumberton. Now, she gets a job as a nurse's aide at a local nursing home and begins dating Stuart Taylor, Dolly's nephew. If you have forgotten Dolly, she killed Dolly and is now dating the nephew.
Oh, gosh. The alcoholic nephew?
Yep.
She didn't learn her lesson off the last alcoholic.
There was a smell she found familiar.
It reminded her of home.
Now, shortly after, she moves in with Stuart in October. And, I guess while she's moving in, Stuart stumbles upon letters that Velma got while she was in prison. And Stuart becomes angry because he didn't know she'd been to prison, but whatever conversation that was, they end up making up. So it just, it threw him off. And then he was like,
let's face it, she was like, no, we talked about this. I think you were drunk. You don't remember this conversation? And then gave him some details, and he's like, oh, you know what?
Maybe.
That does sound a bit right. You know what? I'm sorry. You're right.
I feel like if I was dating somebody who went to jail for forging checks, I'd lock that shit up and be like, shift the valuables. But whatever, they make up, and I guess he's sorry for being angry and judgy because she's been rehabilitated.
And she told him he's just too drunk to remember.
Mm-hmm. But in November, Velma begins stealing from Stuart. She takes a check and forges his name.
Is she gonna freak the fuck out again?
She usually does. But in December, at age 46, Velma has a cancer scare and has her breast surgery to remove her left breast. But it turns out it's not malignant. And to celebrate, she steals another check from Stuart and forges it. Now, by February, she's getting all squirrely that he's going to find out. And then Stuart and Velma have an argument while they're getting ready for church. Now, Velma hands Stuart a beer, and he thinks it's a kind of a truce. So they head to church all happy-go-lucky.
Isn't church in the morning? Are they going to a late night church?
No, apparently it's all too normal to drink in the morning time.
Huh. Okay. Drink going to church at that.
They were tailgating. Although it's concerning that he popped that beer, drank it, and then drove to church.
Did he pop it or did she pop it?
Over in North Carolina.
Yeah, I know, but did she pop it or did he open it? Because I feel like
she opened it and gave it to him.
Mm-hmm. Don't drink it, Stuart. Don't drink it.
He done did. They headed to church after. And what do you know? By the middle of church, Stuart begins feeling sick. But he tries to man up, even though he describes his insides as burning up.
I bet they were.
Now, eventually, he has to excuse himself to go lie down in his truck. Soon after he walks out, Velma follows him outside and stroking his hair, telling him, you know what? Let me drive you home. When they get home, Velma calls his stepmother and his daughter to let him know he's real sick.
She's giving them a chance to come say bye.
I don't know, but Stuart will spend the entire night barfing, and by the next morning, he begs Velma to take him to the hospital. Now, they do go, he is admitted, but the doctors don't find anything more than gastritis wrong with him, so they prescribe him some meds, send him on home to rest, and tell him that he should start feeling better by the morning. Now, morning's going to come, and Stuart will not be feeling better. On February 3rd, 1978, Velma will call an ambulance for Stuart. When they arrive, they find Stuart with very low blood pressure, rapid breathing, and his skin is gray.
What is she giving these people that their skin's turning gray, or is it like a dehydration thing?
I think it's a low blood pressure. You're everything's draining out of you because you're shitting and barfing it all up. So your color's gone. Now, on the way to the hospital, Stuart is restless and moaning. And it's almost as soon as he gets there, they try to start an IV. They perform a tracheotomy. And, they're trying to bring life back to this feller who's going. But he dies in under an hour of his arrival.
Why'd they do a tracheotomy?
My guess would be his throat's closing up. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. That's what they said. They started an IV and we're going to perform a tracheotomy to get some airs in there.
Okay.
Velma would claim that she had been trying to nurse him back to health. It was 3 agonizing, pain-filled days for Stuart to die.
What does she have against all these men?
I don't know, but fuck, why drag it out? How many days do you need in a row of vomit and diarrhea for you to be satisfied? Like, the level of torture and suffering is disgusting.
Yeah, she, I know you're going to yell at me again, and I'm so sad, but does she get like the death penalty? Because I feel like she needs the death penalty.
Does it sound like we're there yet? Because we're not. Quit skipping ahead.
Have you ever watched a movie or a show and you got to Google the person or like look up how it ends because you're just too impatient to keep watching it?
We're
keep
not
watching
a movie together because that shit would irritate. I mean, Andrew,
I wouldn't
cut that
tell
shit out.
you.
I can see you with your computer. Or give me the phone. We're gonna find out together.
I wouldn't spoil
in due
it.
time. No, you would too, because you'd be all relaxed. Like, I know what's gonna happen. He's gonna get his comeuppance or hers.
So Jason and I are watching a show together, and I don't like the one character in it. So I Googled it because we just started the season and there's like 6 seasons. I don't like this guy. And he's apparently in the 6th season. So I know all of the could die.
Peel over in season 2 and you could ride out the rest of the season.
Well, there's like 22 episodes per season and we're like halfway through season 1 and it's like
maybe he'll get better and you'll like him.
No.
Fine.
Anyway.
So after Stuart's funeral, an anonymous tip to the police, later to be determined to be Velma's sister, leads to an investigation. And in March, an autopsy is performed on Stuart, where they find traces of arsenic from rat poison in his system.
You like the rat poison ones?
I do not. It just so happens that there's many women who like to use the rat poison. Be suspicious if it's under the sink, fellas.
There was one lady that
especially if you don't have a rodent problem. Don't let her tell you that's why we don't have a rodent problem. If there was never a rodent problem.
So there was one lady who, I forget where I saw this, it was years ago, but she poisoned her husband and her kids, I think. And she was putting coolant, radiator fluid in green Jello. And then while they were sick, she would feed them the Jello because they had upset tummies. And she was literally poisoning her family members with radiator fluid. It's really sick. I don't understand. Yeah, coolant.
Yeah, so a lot of animals will die that way too because it doesn't have a real strong flavor. I've heard. I don't taste it.
No, I don't neither.
Well, anyway, so
don't trust the green Jello.
This causes the police to dig further into the tragic deaths in Velma's life, which reveal traces of rat poison in some of those deaths.
Did they exhume the bodies?
I would imagine so, Andrea. If they start investigating the deaths, they weren't just laying around.
Well, so nobody got cremated?
Evidently, not everybody.
So I feel like at that point, anybody that died within her presence, they should have exhumed those bodies, because I'd be curious to know if her husband, the first one, died in his chair and then she set him on fire.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That forced them to dig up the other tragic deaths in Velma's life.
All of them?
I don't know all, but they revealed traces of rat poison, and it was the same brand.
I didn't know that you could...
I imagine it's like with weed killer, that where there's a lot of weed killers, there's also a lot of different mixtures, and that's a signature of the brand of what concentration of which chemicals are in there.
Interesting.
Just like even with fabrics, everything's got its own footprint.
It's pretty cool.
Now, Velma is brought in for questioning at the Robeson County Sheriff's Department. She's there for several hours. Now, 3 days later, because she's not arrested then, they're just talking with her. 3 days later, Velma attempts suicide again, but her son intervenes because she's not real good at follow through.
I don't think it's real suicide attempts.
I don't know. I think she tries, but she just goes to the nap-in level. Now, Velma goes to police without an attorney and confesses to poisoning Stuart, Dolly, John Henry, and her mother. Now, she would claim she murdered them because they found out she was stealing from them, and it was also like she was stealing to fund her drug habit, and then murdered them to cover all that up. She would later confess that when she killed Stuart with the rat poison, it was an accident. She just wanted to make him sick.
What?
Now, she would deny killing her 2 husbands and then deny killing Dolly and John Henry.
But she just admitted to it.
I think then she was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. The court-appointed attorney, Bob Jacobson, who fills one of her prescriptions and then brings her an additional antidepressant medication at her request, which, by the way, I didn't know you could just be like, I'm arrested. Could you bring me some pills? I need them. And if you could give me an antidepressant, I need one of them too.
Shouldn't she be on like a suicide watch? She's tried to kill herself multiple times.
I don't know, but 2 hours later, the bailiff will bring Velma her meds. Now,
that's stupid.
2 days in to her arrival at jail, Velma is sent to Dorothea Dix State Hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina for a psychiatric evaluation to make sure she can stand trial.
You were going to say she overdosed.
No, they don't let her have the whole bottle in jail. But
she could put them in her prison purse and save them up.
She's there for 5 weeks, so it wasn't an easy read. Or they just put her in the basement and were like, we got other things to do. I don't know. This one's not a priority. But when she returns to the Lumberton jail, she falls into depression and begins thinking of suicide again. Now, 3 months into waiting a trial, Velma hears a program by evangelist J.K. Kinkle, and this makes her accept forgiveness, and she finds God.
How do you get forgiveness? Who's offered her forgiveness?
I don't know. Apparently the radio show.
Don't you have to be offered forgiveness to be forgiven?
I don't know how that all works. But Velma's radio is usually cranked up to a Christian program, and Velma claimed that she had become a born-again Christian while in jail. Now, although she'd been a churchgoer and professed to love Jesus all her life, Velma would say that she recognized that she had never been a true Christian until now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I have nothing against religion. Let me just say that. But all of these idiots that go around killing people and then hide behind the guise of religion.
I'm reformed. I found Jesus. Don't hurt me. I'm repenting.
They're disgusting human beings. Like, seriously.
Yeah. Her Christianity had been a matter of form and gesture, is what she's saying earlier in her life.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Then, while at her lowest point, waiting for trial, she had finally, genuinely opened her heart to Jesus and received forgiveness and salvation. Now, her newfound faith was greeted with skepticism by many, including the family members of the victims.
Well, no shit.
Because bear in mind, this Looney Tune would speak of her love of Jesus while actively poisoning people she claimed to love. So it's believed that her Christian faith had been a fraud and would continue to be one. And it's just yet another way for her to manipulate those around her. Now, her trial will start in November 1978. She's 47, and she's on trial for first-degree murder of Stuart Taylor. Now, her trial lasts a week, and spoiler alert, she is found guilty of Stuart's murder.
Does bitch die?
Now, Velma's attorney decides it's a good idea to put Velma on the stand to explain herself. Now, Bobby...
I feel like that was Velma's idea. Like
It probably
she
was. I feel like they didn't have any evidence to like you killed someone. But
she's like, just let me get up and explain it. You're not doing a good job. Don't give me that look.
so Bobby, he's never tried a capital punishment case, so he's just like, hey, you know what? This seems like a pretty good idea. But her defense was that she was taking such a wide variety of drugs that she was dependent on them, and it clouded her judgment. She didn't understand. Now, pairing that with her own limited financial resources is what led her down the path of forging checks to fund her habit, since she couldn't pay for her drugs herself. The prosecutor will say that Velma was just a cold blooded murderer and she was just cunning and hiding behind the face of a sweet little old lady and her Christianity.
How old is she?
47. I too, when I read it, was a little offended because I'm not 47, and I feel like when I hit that mark, I'll be offended if somebody describes me as a little old lady. Again, with the
Yeah.
throat punching.
Yeah. No.
Now, during cross examination of Velma, the prosecutor will start out friendly, but he'll work up to being hostile, which she too will get hostile back, which is what he wanted. At one point, she even argues with him that she didn't kill her victims, they just died coincidentally after she poisoned them, and that's why the autopsies first indicated natural deaths.
What? What kind
I
of
know.
logic is that?
I didn't kill them. They died naturally after the poisoning. What?
I can't help it if their bodies rejected the poisoning and it shut down their organs and
They
caused them to vomit and diarrhea themselves to death.
They naturally became dehydrated and their blood pressure dropped. It was
They
just
had
a coincidence. I poisoned them to quicken it for 3 days.
they naturally had a reaction to the poison.
Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a virtual puppet show, if you will, with
Yay! I'm excited. I'm excited.
with the prosecutor and Velma. Now, Velma will be this person right here, and I picture since she's a little old lady being a little winded, just to give you an idea. And then the prosecutor will be this fella right here, because even though we're in the Carolinas, that's what I'm gonna do. Just so you can follow, we got the prosecutor and Velma. So stunned, the prosecutor is gonna ask, "Beg your pardon? I didn't think I killed them, is all." Now, Velma's going to paint herself oddly arrogant and snippy, just as, you know. "You made Miss Edwards sick with rat poison, didn't you?" "No, I thought I was using roach and ant poison." "So you knew these compounds would certainly make people sick?" "Yes, I knew it would make them sick." "You knew it would kill them too, didn't you?" "No, sir. No, I did not." Now, after the prosecutor gave his closing statements to the jury, Velma will sarcastically make a gesture of silent applause, repeatedly putting her hands together without actually clapping.
What?
Yes.
She's got some serious mental issues. What did when they did her mental evaluation, what did they come back as? Because I feel like she's not rap tight.
I feel like her attorney probably looked over and was like, "The fuck are you doing? You
No,
don't applaud the prosecution."
He probably looked over and he's like, "This was my first, and I lost it."
Like, "You didn't clap for me." Now,
She probably asked him for some rat poison and then offered him a cup of tea.
now, Velma was given a death sentence, although her psychiatrist would try to stop Velma from being sentenced to death on the belief she suffered from multiple personality disorder and from dissociative identity disorder, and also that she was a Reformed Christian.
Okay.
The psychiatrist would claim he had spoken to Velma's other personality, which was named Billy, and that personality had talked to the sexual abuse she'd endured at the hands of her father, and that Billy had killed her abuser. Now, mind you, her dad died of cancer, and up until this point, nobody's mentioned her dad being murdered anyhow.
So I'm wondering if that's one of those where they're saying she was killing the men because it was her way of killing, kind of
her
like with
his or her dad.
yeah, kind of like with Gary
Misplaced.
Ridgway. Yeah.
Now, the judge, I picture him just staring there, like, nice try. But he isn't swayed and is actually quoted saying, "One of them did it. I don't care which one." And she was convicted. Which I was like,
I
totally would have
really
high
like,
fived that feller.
right? I like these judges.
Well, it was just funny shit. I really picture him just like dead eyeing this psychiatrist and be like, right, so I don't care if Billy did it. I don't care if Velma did it. I don't care if her other personality, Fred, did it. They're all going to jail.
So what year is this? I know you said it,
79.
but so good on that judge. He's getting his shit together, unlike some of them other judges
Yeah.
in the 70s.
Velma served her time at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. She would be the only female on death row. Now, her first execution date is set for February 3rd, 1979.
That's fast, by the way. If she was arrested in 1979 and then her first execution date was in the
No, she
same date,
was arrested in 78. Her
well, whatever.
trial
That's
was in November 78, and then given an execution date of the next year.
yeah, that's fast.
Yeah, I guess. But
They're normally like 20, 30 years out.
but she doesn't die February 3rd, 1979, but she gets a stay of execution. In September 1980, the North Carolina State Supreme Court flat refuses to hear Velma's appeal, and she gets a new execution date for October. Now she gets yet another stay of execution, and this time the date's moved to December 12th. But guess what? She gets another stay of execution, and that new date of execution is set for March the following year.
Why does she keep getting stays of execution?
I think because she's running out her appeal and playing the whole Billy done it card. But in October 1983, the U.S. Supreme Court would also refuse to hear her case. And they peter around for the remainder of 83. We get to April 1984, where her attorney tries to make the case that she is cracked and insane and can't be put to death in North Carolina.
Because she's cray cray.
Yeah. Well, they move her to the Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, and give her yet another execution date, now of August 31st, 1984. Any guesses what happens?
She gets another stay of execution.
She sure does. And a month later, Velma has supporters appear before the governor of North Carolina to plead her case for clemency. He denies it. Now, at this
Does
point,
she set the prison on fire now?
no, she's done with her flame throwing.
Does she take some pills?
No. Ronnie and Kim would bring their kids to visit their grandmother in October 1984. And also in October, Velma is given the option of lethal injection or the gas chamber, since the lethal injection is rather new. But she chooses lethal injection. She also starts working on letters to her victims' families asking for forgiveness and asks her reverend to distribute them upon her death, which I thought was weird because you'd think you would pass those along prior to your death and then you'd have forgiveness for when you go out.
I think she's a coward and doesn't want to have to actually
interact.
Yeah.
Well, now Velma is the first woman to be executed since 1962. And on the day of her
to a nicer lady.
Now, on the day of her scheduled execution on November 2nd, 1984, a crowd of over 300 people would form outside the prison walls begging for her life. They held up candles and sang hymns. But there was also another crowd of roughly 80 people chanting, "Die, bitch, die!"
I would be on that side.
Right. Now, her last words were, "I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain. All the families connected, and I'm sorry. And I want to thank everybody who has supported me all these 6 years. She was put to death by lethal injection. She was 52. Her last meal was a bag of cheese doodles and a Coca-Cola, which, by the way, that would not be my last meal.
Nor mine, but she wasn't watching her girlish figure no more. Turns out she wasn't going to need that rat poison no more.
Yeah,
hey, they should have given her some rat poison.
If somebody would have been like, this is your last meal, what do you want? I wouldn't be like, that bag of cheese doodles right there, and give me a 2-liter. What? Like, out of everything you could eat, you could try something you've never had before. Your favorite meal is cheese doodles and a Coke? What?
I wonder if when she went out, if her fingers were orange from the cheese doodles. Because I'm guessing cheese doodles
are the same as
like the Cheeto Puffs or Cheetos.
Now, the crowd outside, the crowd of 300 that is, quietly put out the candles and sang softly Velma's favorite hymn. Now, the smaller crowd that was cheering for her to die cheered some more when they got word of her death. Now, the Reverend, the week after Velma's put to death, he tries to deliver the letters she had wrote to the victims' families, but every one of them would refuse to accept them.
I would refuse it also.
Yeah. So what have we learned? Be wary of those always in the right moment at the right time caretakers.
Don't trust the tea.
Be concerned if you have sudden bouts of vomiting and diarrhea and somebody petting your hair.
They sure done diddly did. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.